Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Press, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com, and thanks for tuning in. And we're going to continue now where we left off yesterday in the little book entitled The Origin of Futurism and Preterism. The biblical Protestant interpretation of Bible prophecy was of the historicist school. For 16 centuries at the time of the Protestant Reformation, the papacy had an historical record of fulfilling Bible prophecy regarding the man of sin, the son of perdition, the Antichrist, the little horn of Daniel. The world had its Antichrist. Bible-believing Christians knew who it was and preached against him, even at the cost of their own lives. The Protestant Reformation resulted from that 1,600 years of historicist teaching. The Protestant Reformation was a period of time in the Roman Catholic Church when that historicist understanding of Bible prophecy finally influenced a great many Catholics. Matter of fact, most of Europe. So historicism was the only correct interpretation of Bible prophecy, and its conclusion solidly, perfectly paints the papacy as that man of sin, the son of perdition, the Antichrist. And so the former Roman Catholics now become Protestant reformers, left the Roman Catholic Church, and almost took all of Europe with it. Europe was of the common belief that they had their Antichrist. The Protestants of old, all the way back to the first century church, were correct. It was that power that replaced the Caesars, and that was none other than the papacy. Couldn't be anyone else. And if anyone wished to argue about it, there was literally 16 centuries of the career, the office of the papacy, and all of its atrocities throughout that period as proof. No one could argue. The ground was literally soaked with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. All of those who attested that Jesus is the Christ, the papacy is the Antichrist, they were killed. Papacy issued orders to the kings of the earth to round up these heretics, and if they won't recant of their heresy, burn them at the stake, stretch them on the rack, torture them, confiscate their personal property, their children, separate them from their wives, disembowel the pregnant women, do whatever it takes to silence the truth, the biblical, prophetic, and historic truth. So the world had its Antichrist. It was certain of it. Then came the Council of Trent, convened by the papacy after some 25 years of dragging its feet. The Jesuits were formulated. They took control of the Council of Trent, and they issued an all-out war of annihilation against this Protestant belief, this historicist belief that positively identified the papacy as the man of sin, the son of perdition, that set all of Europe in rebellion against the Pope. There had to be a way to defeat Protestantism, and the power behind Protestantism was its historicist interpretation of the prophecies. So the Jesuits had to devise at least one, and perhaps possibly two, different schools of Bible prophecy interpretation. We've been talking about them. The first is Preterism, and the second is Futurism. Both schools of Bible prophecy interpretation whitewash the Pope and put the onus of Antichrist either in the distant past or the distant future. And the whole career of the papacy throughout the entire Christian era is exonerated. Okay? This is how they deceive the whole world. This is how the papacy deceives the whole world. Through Preterism and Futurism. Okay? So immediately after the Council of Trent, after war was officially declared against the historicist interpretation of Bible prophecy, that power which strengthened Protestantism, the protest against the papacy, they went to work coming up with alternative views in alternative schools of Bible prophecy interpretation that would exonerate the papacy and render the Protestant Reformation, well, heresy. Okay? And so the Roman Catholic Church blamed the Antichrist on Nero or some figure from the ancient Roman Empire, and the Futurists blamed the role of Antichrist on a single individual just before Christ returns. So now you have the whole history of the church without an Antichrist. Those were the two alternatives. Futurism, the one that's most prevalent, the one that's most believed today, almost universally believed today, was the product of the Jesuit priest named Alberto Ribera. And he was strengthened by another Jesuit cardinal, Cardinal Bellarmine. And the two of them came together and worked to overthrow the historicist belief. And history reveals that they did just that. Otherwise, Vatican Council II, which was simply a declaration, a public declaration of the Roman Catholic Church that it had conquered Protestantism, it had conquered historicism by the fact that all Christians today are either preterist or futurist in their interpretation and have exonerated the papacy, most of whom even seek to now ecumenically reunite with the Roman Catholic Church and make one church all under the Pope, declared victory over Protestantism, over historicism, and left an ultimatum. You either come back to the Roman Catholic Church or you're a heretic. You're not a church in the proper sense. Okay? You don't have full communion with the Holy See. And the implication is obvious that Rome intends to return to her old wicked ways, to snuff out heretics. The ground is about to be soaked once again by the Roman Catholic Church with the help of the ecumenical evangelibellies to silence the truth, the historicist truth. Now, we'll pick up where we left off yesterday. The author says there were two alternatives, okay, Preterism and Futurism. If the Antichrist were not a present power, that is, the papacy, he must either be a past power or a future power. Some writers asserted that the predictions pointed back to Nero. This has become the preterist view, that Nero was the Antichrist. This did not take into account the obvious fact that the anti-Christian power predicted in the Bible was to succeed the fall of the Caesars, that is, immediately succeed the fall of the Caesars and develop among the Gothic nations, that is, those nations that occupied the land right around what is known today as Italy. Okay? The Bible, Daniel particularly talks about a little horn that stands up among 10 kings and devours 3 kings. This was literally, historically fulfilled early in the 5th and 6th centuries. Okay? The papacy wiped out those nations, even so much so that their histories are not even known anymore. The Gothic kings were uprooted by the papacy. This is a provable historical fact. And with those 3 Gothic kingdoms out of the way, the papacy was able to prosper, to practice and to prosper and to grow to the Antichrist power that it is today. All right? Now, the other alternative became, therefore, the popular one with papists. In other words, with Roman Catholics. Okay? Preterism became popular among Roman Catholics. And it says Antichrist was future, or rather, I should have said Futurism became the popular view of papists. Trust me when I tell you, both alternative schools of Bible prophecy, both Preterism and Futurism, have always been popular in the Roman Catholic Church. That's the way the papacy always silenced dissent within the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? If the Antichrist is not and cannot be the Pope, well, then it must be a figment of of history or a figment of the future. But they're both figments of the papacy's wicked imagination. Okay? So that's how Rome took care of dissent within the Roman Catholic Church, even back at that time. Certainly, Roman Catholics could read Daniel's prophecy and then see the papacy rising up in history after the fall of the Caesars and going to war against the Gothic kings, the three kings that it uprooted. Certainly, Roman Catholics were not so useless in the Scriptures that they could not see at least the possibility that it is the papacy that fulfilled that prophecy. And some dared to make the accusation. And Rome silenced them with either a preterist interpretation that the Antichrist fell with the ancient Caesars of the Roman Catholic Church, or it's a future power yet to be determined in history. So, when the Protestant Reformation came and the widespread knowledge and understanding that the papacy is, was, and always will be the Antichrist, the Jesuits just resurrected these old preterist and futurist interpretations of the prophecies as a means to battle heresy among the Protestants, okay, who were former Catholics and had formerly believed in either preterism or futurism. Okay? When they read their Bibles for themselves, they realized that the Antichrist is not a historical figure that died at the time of the fall of the Roman Empire. No, it succeeded the Roman Empire. It has to be that way. Scripture demands that it is the power that replaced the Caesars. They understood what Paul said in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 7. He who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. Well, who was Paul referring to in the now? It was the Caesars. So Roman Catholics all throughout history have recognized this. The Protestant reformers, after reading the Bible for the first time in their own language, understood this. And they, like all Bible believers throughout history, raised up a protest against the papacy. And so the two schools of alternative interpretations of the prophecy, both Preterism and Futurism, have replaced historicism. In other words, Protestantism is dead. To the degree that historicism lives, Protestantism lives. To the degree that historicism dies, Protestantism dies. Well, here on Inquisition Update, historicism is alive and well. On First Amendment Radio, and particularly Nicholas's program, Cross the Border, historicism is alive and well. That means Protestantism is alive and well. Who else among the hosts on First Amendment Radio protests the papacy morning, noon, and night? The historicists. The futurists have no beef with the Antichrist of Rome. The preterists have no beef against the Antichrist of Rome. It's only the historicists on First Amendment Radio that have a beef with the papacy. And it's the same beef that all the saints throughout history had with the papacy. It's the same beef that the Protestant reformers had against the papacy, the Antichrist, the man of sin, the little horn of Daniel. And that will never change. Never. But Rome, if it was going to survive, if the Vatican, if the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church was ever to survive, it was a matter of survival that Protestantism didn't spread, that historicism didn't spread. So the Jesuits went to school, and they dug up these ancient teachings in the Roman Catholic Church. They resurrected them, and instead of pounding Roman Catholics with it, they infiltrated it into the Protestant schools. Okay? No longer was it fashionable or even tolerated to continue the view that the papacy is, was, and always will be the Antichrist. All of a sudden, historicists found themselves a minority, a persecuted minority. History is repeating itself. Okay? The old world order died at the time of the Protestant Reformation. The New World Order sprang to life at the fall of the Protestant Reformation. And it fell when it became popular belief and understanding that the papacy is not the Antichrist, that it's either Nero or some Donald Duck at the end of time. And so now all the churches are seeking to unite to make one global, quote-unquote, Christian church, and it's nothing of the sort. Absolutely nothing of the sort. They can preach Jesus Christ and Him crucified till the cows come home. As long as they worship the Pope, they are not Christ's. Okay? The papacy preaches Jesus Christ, don't they? The Roman Catholic Church preaches Jesus Christ. But they obey the Pope and all of his laws. And they say God's laws are dead. God's laws were just for the Jews, they say. And how readily that nonsense is gobbled up in the churches. I'm telling you, there's not a safe place in any church for a true Bible-believing historicist, a true Bible-believing Protestant. All right? These two schools, these two Roman Catholic schools of Bible prophecy interpretation, have made historicists heretics. Okay? Intolerable heretics. That's the label that's placed on those who still hold to the historicist school of Bible prophecy interpretation, to the Protestant school of Bible prophecy interpretation. Okay? The author continues, he says, the other alternative became therefore the popular one with papists. Antichrist was future. So Ribera and Bossuet and others taught. Okay, Bossuet is a Jesuit too. And it says an individual man was intended to be the Antichrist, not a dynasty of popes. The duration of his power would not be 1200 and 12 and a half centuries, but only 3.5 years. He would be a Jew and sit in a Jewish temple. Okay? Now look, if the Roman Catholic Church is teaching that the Antichrist is going to be a Jew sitting in a Jewish temple, and the Roman Catholic Church is preaching this during the medieval ages and the Middle Ages, then you have to conclude that somehow, if the papacy is going to fulfill its futurist interpretation of a Jew in a Jewish temple, they've got to build a modern nation state of Israel, don't they? There has to be a modern nation state of Israel in the world, don't there? Doesn't there have to be? I mean, common sense dictates if the papacy is going to preach that the Antichrist is a Jew and is going to sit in a Jewish temple, well, there must be a Jewish homeland. See how badly the papacy needs a modern nation state of Israel? And Jews living in the land? And a temple built? And animal sacrifices again to be reinstituted with a 7-year treaty? They're trying to refulfill Daniel's prophecy, which was perfectly and completely fulfilled by Jesus Christ the Messiah 2,000 years ago. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 through 27. They reject Jesus as the Christ, so they're going to refulfill the 70th week of Daniel in a future temple in Jerusalem. They're going to prop up a phony Antichrist that seems to fulfill Rome's interpretation of Daniel's prophecy. And then once he's done away with, then the Pope can be the Christ. That's what Rome plans to do. All of her Counter-Reformation Jesuits promoted this future fulfillment of the 70th week of Daniel, thus denying Christ, denying Messiah has come in the flesh, which is the spirit of Antichrist. The Antichrist Church of Rome is the spirit of Antichrist in the world. It denies that Jesus was the fulfillment of Daniel's 70th week. And it promotes a future 70th week that requires a Jewish nation, Jews living in the land, a Jewish temple, a Jewish priesthood, and Jewish sacrifices, and a Jewish Antichrist. It's as simple as falling off a log. Makes perfect sense. Rome showed her hand when she preached that the Antichrist would be a Jew in a Jewish temple. Rome showed the world too many of her cards. All you've got to do is look at her hand and see what she holds. She holds in her hand a future, counterfeit, dummied up, man-made re-fulfillment of Daniel's 70th week prophecy. Okay? And it was Ribera, Bossuet, and Robert Bellarmine that gave popularity to this futurist interpretation of Bible prophecy. Never mind that the papacy for 1,600 years had fulfilled every prophecy regarding the Antichrist, that it was a no-brainer to come up with the conclusion that the papacy was the Antichrist and always will be the Antichrist. Somehow, these Jesuits were so effective and successful in promoting the futurist interpretation, the futurist fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy, that Protestants just laid down and died. They gave up their historical understanding. How could Satan take that away from them? How could the Antichrist Church of Rome take that away from them? How could the spirit of Antichrist so deceive God's people? There's no excuse. There's no excuse. So for our spiritual health, it's certainly not going to benefit our physical health, but for our spiritual health, we have to restore the historicist understanding of Bible prophecy. Okay, Rome put forth two alternative schools of Bible prophecy. One was more popular among Roman Catholics than the other, but they were both popular in the Roman Catholic Church because if Roman Catholics didn't believe either one or the other of these alternative schools of Bible prophecy, all they had left was historicism. If they didn't believe in Preterism, they didn't believe in Futurism, all that's left is historicism. And that is the belief that the papacy was, and always will be the Antichrist. So Roman Catholics were silenced long ago with Preterism and Futurism. It worked so well in the Roman Catholic Church that the Jesuits just resurrected it, started teaching it in the Protestant churches. Okay, Antichrist was future according to the Jesuits. So Ribera and Bossuet and other Jesuits taught. An individual man, they said, was intended, not a dynasty of popes. That the duration of the power of the Antichrist would not be for 12.5 centuries, as the historicists believed and taught, but only 3.5 years. He would be a Jew and sit in a Jewish temple. Speculation about the future took place of the study of the past and the present, and careful comparisons of the facts of history with the predictions of the Bible prophecy. This related, so as was asserted, not to the main course of history of the church, but only to the few closing years of history. How easily God's people are deceived. It's time for us to undeceive God's people. In the name of Jesus. Come back after the break and we'll continue on Inquisition Update.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio, and if you'd like to support this program, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors it. Please email me also if you got questions or comments. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. Yes, I answer my email eventually. I pardon myself to my listeners who might wait days or possibly even weeks for a reply. Sometimes it takes a little research on my part to properly answer a question, and I'm not haphazard in my responses, and sometimes they take a little bit of time. But all those emails that require a response, I give a response, and if I can't answer the questions, I refer to those who can, and I try to do the best I can for my listeners. So if you would like to email me, please do so. My email address is tom@seawaves.us, tom@seawaves.us, and also check out the website inquisitionupdate.org. Now, back to Futurism. After the Council of Trent, when the Vatican declared all-out war against historicism to defeat the Protestant Reformation, they came up with two alternative schools of Bible prophecy, Futurism and Preterism, and Preterism became the most popular among Protestants, amazingly, just miraculously. The papacy must be in unspeakable glee that the Protestants swallowed Futurism when it should have stuck crossways in their throat. Only God can explain what happened. Because Logic cannot explain why the Protestants all of a sudden gave up their Protestantism, gave up their protest, gave up their historicist school of Bible prophecy interpretation as confirmed in history as true, and bought a futurist lie, a craftily devised fable, one that is not going to be fulfilled until the distant future, so one can't even prove these futurist assertions. So what happens when all of a sudden the whole Protestant world begins to question historicism and start to believe in a futurist interpretation of Bible prophecy? They're left with nothing else but speculation. Look, if God prophesies and the prophecy is not fulfilled in history yet, all we can do is prognosticate or postulate or speculate about how God might fulfill these prophecies. No one can be certain about anything until the prophecy is fulfilled in history, and then we know, aha, this is the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. This is what God intended. We see it with our own eyes. Now we know God is God because He can prophesy the future. He is a true prophet because His prophecies come to fulfillment in history. We can witness it with our own eyes. We have nothing but assurance that God will fulfill the rest of His prophecies as He sees fit in time. And it does no good to speculate. Okay? So what did the Jesuit Counter-Reformation lead to but speculation among Protestants? They've got nothing solid with which to grasp. They have no power in speculation. There's no power or authority in speculation. And those Bible prophecy schools that used to just simply study history and the fulfillment, the tangible, visible, real, historical fulfillments of God's prophecies, what did these prophecy schools turn into? Exercises in speculation. If they no longer see the papacy as the Antichrist, all they can do is speculate about a future Antichrist. And that's what all these prophecy conferences around the United States and around the world, that's what they are. Just an exercise in speculation. It's great entertainment, so long as you don't understand the deceivableness of wickedness that characterizes it. Great entertainment. People will come thousands of miles to a prophecy conference to sit and be entertained by speculation. It's like betting on a football game. Everybody comes and tells their version of how God might fulfill this futurist interpretation when God's not going to fulfill any futurist interpretation of Daniel's prophecy, because Daniel prophesied the coming of the Messiah. Daniel prophesied about the Messiah, never once mentioning Antichrist in that whole prophecy. Daniel prophesied the coming of the Messiah, literally the calendar date for the coming of Christ's first advent, as it's called. That's what made Jesus the Messiah, the long-awaited Messiah. But these speculators, these Bible prophecy experts that have grown fat and wealthy on fictitious books that sell like hotcakes in all the Christian bookstores, that are even made available on the pulpits of Protestant churches, is nothing but carefully devised fables and speculations about a prophecy that God will not allow to be fulfilled in anyone but His Son. And we've already made plentiful mention that there must be a hitch in the papacy's futurist interpretation. There must be a hitch in the Pope's get-along, because things just aren't going according to Hoyle. There's still not a temple built in Jerusalem since the creation of the modern nation-state of Israel in 1948. What's taken the Pope so long? What's taking the Jesuits so long? Is there a problem? Are you having difficulty? You Jesuit priests? God is not cooperating with your futurist plans? You're having a little difficulty. But you've got time because you've still got the whole Protestant world deceived with your deceptions. Except this author seems to mention that some people are getting a little bit nervous. They haven't been raptured out yet. And there might be just something going wrong with this futurist interpretation. So, to your benefit, they're abandoning Futurism, but they're going back to Preterism, which is another one of your deceptions that exonerates the papacy. But what are you going to do, you Jesuits? What are you going to do, you craftily devised fablers, when historicism is restored in God's house? What are you going to do then? Going to resort to sorcery or bloodshed like you've always done? That's what's going to happen. Bloodshed. When Satan doesn't get his way, what does he do? Starts lopping off heads, burning people at the stake. You're finding a little difficulty fulfilling your futurist cockamamie lies. And you've struggled so long with this, even the ignorant are becoming aware that there must be something wrong with the futurist interpretation as you put forth in this world. And all I got to do is keep talking about historicism until it becomes the common knowledge teaching in God's house once again. God will add voice to voice. God will raise up the bones of ancient Protestants, put sinew on their bones, flesh on their bones, blood coursing through their veins, and a mouth that speaks great and powerful words in the name of Jesus, the Messiah, the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy 2,000 years ago. What are you Jesuits going to do then? There isn't enough fire in hell to help you. And what if, just what if, some of the Jews in Jerusalem that you persecuted and placed down their destruction, what if they become historicists in their interpretation and begin, like the Protestants, to see the papacy as their principal persecutor throughout history? What if the Jews accept Jesus as the Christ, as any Protestant would have them do? Would they still seek to build a temple? Would they still seek to make animal sacrifices when Jesus becomes their lamb, which was slain for them 2,000 years ago, and they have no need for a lamb today? They would need no temple, would they? And they would need no peace treaty, would they? How far do you think God's going to let your Antichrist papal fraud of futurism continue? I hold in my hand a little book. It's entitled The Origin of Futurism and Preterism. You Jesuits, listen carefully. If my listeners and their listeners and their listeners finally comprehend what's written in this little booklet, the Futurism and Preterism, your Roman Catholic futurist interpretation of Daniel's prophecy goes up in flames. There'll be no temple built in Jerusalem. There'll be only Jews on their knees worshiping the Lamb of God, which was slain before the foundation of the world. Protestants and Jews will be one flesh. And that will leave you odd man out. I hold in my hand a little book that can bring truth to this entire world and put you Jesuits on the run wherever you exist. The Jesuit-led Counter-Reformation would go up in a day. That's what I intend to do for the rest of my life. Preach the contents of this little booklet, The Origin of Futurism and Preterism, exposing your craftily devised fables, showing the world how you've deceived the whole world. I'm exposing you Jesuits as the authors of both of these two cockamamie, counterfeit, contradictory, self-contradictory interpretations of Bible prophecy. You're childish in your efforts. You've told two conflicting lies. The Jesuits have offered two lies that contradict one another. Mutually exclusive lies. That paints you as the culprit. By your own craftiness, you've destroyed yourself. Just like when Johnny told his parents, "Oh, I couldn't have stolen the cookies, I was in the bathroom." Or, if Mom didn't believe that lie, you told another lie, "Oh, I couldn't have taken the cookies, I was down to Jimmy's house." Now, see, that's what you childish Jesuits have done. You've told two contradictory lies, and therefore you have marked yourself as a liar. You have marked yourself as the culprit. And if I can understand it, a simple Iowa farm boy, if I can understand it, then the Jews can understand it. Catholics can understand it. Protestants can understand it. An 8-year-old child can understand it. What would happen if in a day historicism was restored in the world? Jesuits would be put on the run. Satan and his hell would not be a refuge for you anywhere in the world. Maybe it would cast you back into the bottomless pit from where you came. You see the power of historicism? My listeners, you see the power of historicism? How it could set us all free from this Jesuit tyranny, from this papal tyranny. But for now, you believe that the Antichrist is future. The Jesuits have you by your private parts, and they're not going to let you go. As long as you continue to believe either one or the other of their lies, and argue back and forth about which lie is most convincing, Rome's got you and will never let you go. But historicism will free you of all of these lies and will bring you to Christ. Okay? The Jesuits intend for you to believe that the Antichrist is an individual man, not a dynasty of popes. And the duration of this fictitious futurist Antichrist would not be for 1250 years, as is prophesied, 1260, but only 3.5 years. That's what the papacy would have you do. You know what? Another problem the papacy's done, they've got to fulfill all their futurist baloney in 3.5 years. Think God's going to allow them to do that in 3.5 years? Or do you think God might just throw a monkey wrench in the works just to give you a chance to comprehend that you've been deceived? I'm trusting in God to throw that monkey wrench right in that 3.5 year period. Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy. You don't think that God is going to allow the Jesuits to so perfectly fulfill that 70th week of prophecy all over again so as to deceive his people for whom he died? So we can expect, there's one speculation you can pretty well expect to come true. God's going to throw his monkey wrench in there. Rome's going to have a tough time explaining this 3.5 year period and the fulfillment of certain events within that 3.5 year period. It's not going to come off without a hitch. It's going to be just enough revelation to wake up a few Protestants and maybe to wake up a few Jews. I do not believe that God plays so fast and loose with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus that he would allow them to be so perfectly deceived by a seemingly perfect fulfillment of Daniel's 70th week prophecy. And aren't we already seeing hitches in their get along? Like I said before, it's been all since 1948 the Jewish state has existed. The Jews have been in the land. The Jews even now have possession of Jerusalem. And Donald Duck in Washington, D.C. is even going to move the United States Embassy, the American Embassy, to Jerusalem. Now that has to mark the beginning of the 3.5 years, doesn't it? You speculators out there, maybe Donald Duck is the Antichrist. Donald Duck in Washington, D.C., the one with the duck hair. He quacks the Jewish Futurism. He quacks whatever the Pope puts in his mouth. He's a papal stooge. He was educated in Jesuit universities, so were all of his kids. Playing along with this futurist thing. They're having trouble making a credible showing. God's people are becoming nervously uncomfortable with the lack of fulfillment of their futurist facade, and they're looking for answers. Some of them are looking for answers in Preterism. They're not going to find any answers there either. And some of them just might embrace historicism again. And if they start embracing historicism, you Jesuits are going to need a massive diversion of attention. What do you suppose that might be? We won't speculate. All right, the Jesuits would have you believe that the Antichrist is an individual man, not a dynasty of popes. That this future Antichrist, this individual man, would reign for only 3.5 years, not 12.5 centuries. And that he would be a Jew and sit in a Jewish temple. Does anybody understand? I've just explained to you both the First and the Second World Wars. I've just explained to you Theodore Herzl. I've just explained to you Balfour, Lord Balfour and his declaration. I've just explained to you General Allenby. I've just explained to you Winston Churchill. I've just explained to you Adolf Hitler. I've just explained to you Mussolini. I've just explained to you the whole Nazi movement and the center of the wars in Germany, the very seat of the Protestant Reformation, the very seat of historicism in the world. And out of all that, we got a modern nation state of Israel. And we got persecution of the Jews, so much so that whether they wanted to go back to Israel or not, they're there now. And they're still under attack, day and night. And the Vatican and the United States government have answers that never satisfy the problem. See a few hitches in their get along? I don't think God's cooperating at all with the Pope's phony futurist interpretation of Daniel's prophecy. I think the truth's coming out, and I think people with just a few neurons to rub together can come to a right conclusion about all this. Everything that has happened since the Council of Trent have been man-made, geared toward a man-made or a man of sin-made refulfillment of Daniel's prophecy. Everything that has happened in the quote-unquote Christian world has been geared toward deceiving God's people to believe in a future fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy. And look at the number of people that lost their lives to accomplish that modern nation state of Israel with the mere hope that the Jews will move down there, that they will build a temple, begin animal sacrifices again. And it's just not going off in a timely manner. It's starting to look a little amateurish. It's starting to look a little clumsy. It's starting to look a little doubtful. Well, I'm here to talk to you doubters. I'm here to win you over to the truth. You know, I heard it said one time, I discussed all these things on amateur radio in a very, very live environment. And I finally heard one voice in the din of all the jamming and persecution and name-calling and death threats and everything else. One man finally said, you know, I've listened to Tom for 5 minutes and I've heard more truth than I've heard in a whole lifetime of Christianity. Now, I don't intend to flatter myself with that. I think he was going a little bit overboard, but I can understand what he was saying. Because for 50 years of my life, I heard nothing but this futurist garbage. Nothing. Morning, noon, and night. Every time I went to church, I heard about this futurist nonsense. So much that I know that there isn't a church in this land that is comfortable with the historicist interpretation of Bible prophecy. There isn't a church in this country that would allow me to come to preach. And they won't allow me to preach it on ham radio either. And if I'm lucky, I've got a half a dozen listeners here on First Amendment Radio. But I'm going to stay here till Christ takes me home. I'm going to keep preaching historicism morning, noon, and night, because it's the only hope for God's people. It's the only hope for the Jews. It's the only hope for the Gentile believers. Historicism could make both Jew and Gentile one flesh in Jesus Christ. Historicism is the truth. Historicism is the only thing that can defeat the Antichrist of Rome. It did it once, 500 years ago. Now we need to finish him off. Historicism is the truth. Speculation about the future took place after the study of the past, took the place of intellectual study of the past and the present. That's what happened when Futurism became known. When Futurism became believed in the Protestant Reformation, it reduced a Protestant church that diligently sought the Scriptures, that diligently searched and researched history to find the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, turned them all into a conflicting, imaginative house of speculation that can't accomplish a thing. Speculation about the future, that's all they can do. They've all got a different slant. And confusion results. There's nothing certain in the Protestant churches anymore. And Protestants have literally made fools of themselves. And who is laughing the loudest? Well, of course, the man of sin in Rome and his Jesuit priests. How long are we going to remain the mockery of the world? How long are we going to remain the fools of this world? How long are we going to reject Christ and believe papal lies? Tomorrow we'll continue the reading of this little booklet on Inquisition Update. Come back and hear the truth, the historicist truth.
Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the Scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.